36 Chamber of Shaolin, Shaw Brothers classic, Gordon Liu classic, another Gordon Liu classic. Love this movie because it shows a man's determination to learn a certain skill over time, being the 36 chambers, or the 35 chambers of Shaolin, should I say. Now, he arrives at the Shaolin Temple after escaping from a situation in which he was a victim. His people were a victim of, I believe it's the Mongols in this one again. I always get confused because in a lot of these movies, there's at the beginning there's always some sort of injustice by a certain group of people. I know in a lot of them, like in the 8-diagram pole fighter, it's the Mongols. I'm pretty sure it's the Mongols in this one as well. Comment down below, let me know if I'm right. But he's coming from a situation in which his allies have been victimized by, I believe, the Mongols, and he escapes to the Shaolin Temple. One of his friends doesn't make it. There's two of them that escape, and he makes it to the Shaolin Temple. And again, he wants to be a monk. He wants to learn kung fu. He wants to learn martial arts so he can use it to help the unfortunate, so that they can defend themselves. And the Shaolin don't really want to be involved in other people's affairs and all of this, but he's very determined to learn. Then he finds out he has to go through these 36 or 35, I keep saying 36 chambers, the 35 chambers of Shaolin Temple, and within each chamber there's a certain skill that he has to master over a period of time. And the first 10 chambers are things like holding onto there's one where he has to hold on to a long stick with a weight on the end, and then every time one of the monks taps one of the instruments, he has to sound the gong, by holding the stick, and it's really hard for his wrist to do that. So he's strengthening up his wrists in that chamber until he's able to do that. There's one where he has to hold the buckets of water, and they've got blades attached to their arms, and if they lower the bucket, then it stabs them, so they have to stay upright. So there's loads of these things, and even while he's going along these, he's going through these chambers, he's saying to the abbot, he's like, why? I came here to learn how to fight. Why am I doing all this? But it's to strengthen his body, his mind, his spirit, so he's able, before he even starts learning the sword forms and the fist forms and the fighting that he came to learn. Because you need to have the strong body in Shaolin Kung Fu to perform a lot of the movements. Me, myself, I did Shaolin Kung Fu in China for 5 months, and I can tell you it was this kind of old school training where you have to do things like that, climbing up and down mountains and things like that, going to the river and then hitting the water surface, toughening your arms, hitting trees and things like that. It really toughens your forearms, and it's a lot of really base work that you have to do to get the fundamentals are really important. And he spent a year at Shaolin before he even started doing the 36 chambers, and then it'd been, I think they said it was 26 months before he completed the first 10 chambers. And the first 10 chambers he wasn't doing any martial arts training per se. I think it's the stage where the chamber where he gets to the part where he has to headbutt the monks have to go through these heavy bags hanging from a ceiling, or not. It's in an outdoor setting, so it's kind of, they're just hanging heavy bags, and they have to go through it and they have to headbutt each one of them, and they're all getting dizzy and and their heads are getting damaged from doing that, but they're strengthening their skulls. And then they have to light a bit of incense at the end, and by the time they get to the end, they're so dazed that they're on the ground. But when he's on the ground and he's just he's almost like he's giving up, he can't do it, the monk who's in charge of that chamber is keep going, because after this you'll get to learn sword forms and fist forms and the Shaolin Kung Fu form. So you see his eyes light up. He's kind of yes, he needs to get through that. So it's and at that point, I think he'd been doing it for another, he'd been there for another 26 months on top of the year. And by the time I think he finishes the 35 chambers of Shaolin, it's been 5 years. So it's this, you don't really see this kind of storytelling in movies anymore. It's all instant gratification. It's all like The Matrix. He sits in the chair, he plugs a plug into the back of his head, and he knows jiu-jitsu in like 10 seconds. It's like that kind of culture that we have today, where everyone wants it now and they're not prepared to go through these hardships. And what I love about these films is they show the training scenes. I love because they show the stages of someone who's mastering a skill, how difficult they find it at first and how they're not able to do it, and they just keep going and going and going until they can do it. What I love about Gordon Liu in this film is his determination. One of the first chambers he goes through, he has to, the monks have to cross a water pool, and in the middle of there's like a log. So he sees them all hopping over the log, and it kind of looks easy. When he does it, he just sinks and drops down into the little pool, and he can't go into, and they have to cross over there to go to eat. And they can't enter the temple with wet clothes. So when he tries to go to the temple, they're like, you can't come in with the wet clothes. So he has to dry off his clothes in the sun. And by the time he's dried off his clothes in the sun, goes into the dining hall, all the monks have eaten all the food, so he's starving. He hasn't got the food that he wanted because he didn't accomplish the task. So you see him start the monks giving him advice, and then he in his sleep at night while everyone else is sleeping, he goes back to that little pool and he starts to practice the principles of how to hop over the river with the log. And it's just such great storytelling in terms of this man's determination to achieve his goal, and even after he does achieve, he goes through the 35 chambers, like the abbot says to him, now you can, you've done this in like a record amount of time. And I think it was 5 years. So imagine what all the other monks, how long they took. So for him, he took 5 years, and that was a record. And he said, like, you can be in charge of one of the chambers. And one of the other monks, who was kind of apprehensive about him entering the Shaolin, says, no, he's not ready. He says, if you can beat me and with my swords, which are, I think he had two butterfly knives actually. He says, if you can beat me with my swords, then he'll be worthy, but he's not ready yet. So he tries a couple of times to beat him, and he loses. He keeps losing. And I think the first time he has, does he have a staff? I think he has a staff the first time. And then he has a kind of shovel weapon. I forget what the weapon's called. On one side it's got a moon crescent. On the other side it's kind of got a spade surface. And it's like a long pole. So he uses that, and he starts training with that. And he starts to figure out, okay, maybe I can disarm him with the moon crescent end. And that doesn't work. And then he moves into, he goes back to his training again, and he breaks the bamboo, and he creates the 3-section staff. 3-section staff's like obviously 3 staff points attached by two chains. And this is a very advanced kung fu weapon. One I didn't have a chance of training in my time in China, but I'd love to learn this form. It's very hard to use. And then you see when he fights him again, he's created the 3-section staff, and the Shaolin monks are looking at it like, oh, what's that weapon he's using? Oh, he made it up himself. So it's like you're seeing the birth of the 3-section staff from Shaolin Temple. And that was great because he was able to beat him with using that weapon, and that becomes his kind of signature weapon moving forward. But it's just a great movie, absolute classic kung fu movie. If you want a classic, I mean, I know in the mainstream, people who watch martial arts films nowadays, they'll say Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Yip Man obviously is a great movie. Donnie Yen, probably Donnie Yen's best performance on film. But they'll mention these very commercial films, but they don't know about these films. These are the classics. These are the movies. If you're a fan of martial arts cinema and you haven't watched these movies, you need to go back and watch the Shaw Brothers classics and the Golden Harvest classics. But this one is definitely a must watch. Any proper martial art film fan will tell you 36 Chambers of Shaolin is a must watch movie. One of Gordon Liu's best. Highly recommend it. Anyway, if If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe. Comment down below. Let me know how many times you've seen 36 Chambers of Shaolin. Is it your favorite martial art movie of all time? What is your favorite martial art movie of all time? I'd love to know. And are you a big fan of the Shaw Brothers movies and the Gordon Liu movies? I'd love to know your thoughts. Anyway, I'll see you next time for another video. And remember, behind every fight is a great story. Peace.